Hello and good morning friends, welcome once again to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, in yesterday's lecture we discussed about the Black American drama and theatre. We discussed on the early phase of the Black American drama and theatre, and regarding this phase I would like to tell you all that we discussed about the emergence and origins of the Black American drama and theatre, and today also, dear friends, we would be discussing on the Black American drama and theatre itself, but today we are going to discuss on the later phase of the drama and theatre related to the Black Americans. And dear friends, I would like to tell you all that today we would be basically discussing on the major contemporary dramatist during the Black American drama and theatre emergence. And for this we have again with us in our studios Dr. Bhim Dahiya. As I always say that he has always have with us that potential, that beautiful examples which he used to give to us during the lecture, and I hope that today also he would be giving us ample of examples so that it would become easier for you to understand this very topic, that is the Black American drama and theatre. So first of all, I would like to welcome our guest Dr. Bhim Dahiya. Hello sir, welcome to the EduSet lecture. As yesterday's lecture was very interesting, I hope that today's session is also going to be very interesting, because sometimes it is difficult to read the entire book and find out the gist, but with the help of these lectures it becomes so easy that it increases our interest to read the books further. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, to resume yesterday's story of black drama and theatre, we covered the early phase where the black drama was trying to find a place for itself in the white world, white society of America, and had to face a lot of difficulties, hostilities, downright violence, and yet they continued their struggle and finally succeeded in getting their voice heard through the theatre. Now, the later phase, I would say, begin with the later half of the 20th century, that is 1950s. And it is, of course, not possible to touch upon each and every dramatist on the black theatre side writing during this period, but we shall take up the major playwrights and their important works and their significance to the growth of black drama and theatre. Professional drama by African American now. Earlier they used to be called Negro writers, then black writers, and then Afro-American writers. These days, the latest is the African-American writers. So the very change of terminology from Negro to the African writer, you can say, or African-American writer, there is a greater recognition, acceptability, and even respectability extended to the black people, the black writers, and the black theatre. In 1953, we have a dramatist called Louis Peterson, Louis, Louis Peterson, Peterson. Now, this black American dramatist is known for the play that he wrote and which made a mark, is Take a Giant Step. So the very title itself explains a good deal what it is about. It is a direct address to the blacks to take the bold step the giant step ahead in their struggle, in their fight against their adversary, the whites. Now, another change that comes about with this play is that rather than the hero coming from the South America as a slave or as a plantation worker, now after 1950s, you have the educated black American as hero, and that too from the north of America, the northern states, not from the south. So there is a big gap between North America and South America. North America is more modern, more industrialized, and far ahead of the South. South continues to be conservative, largely agricultural based, and orthodox in their attitudes, particularly to the black people. Hence, the change in the later phase of the black American drama is indicated by the very change of the hero, the very change of the locale, which is now North America, no longer the South America. Here in this play, take a giant step. The location is Philadelphia in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania is one of the major states of North America, and the hero Scott, you see, he's an educated black, but then he is living in the white neighborhood. He is the only black living in a white neighborhood, so cut off from his own people and not, you see, being allowed to share or to mix up with the whites. So he is completely isolated from both sides, from his own people and from the white people. Consequently, he has to undergo a social boycott. He has to suffer psychological anguish. And it is this which constitutes the focus of this play by Louis Peterson, the play called Take a Giant Step. Now, the next in line, another major playwright on the black drama side was Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes, primarily, you would remember, we touched upon, was a poet, and he made a mark more as a poet, but then he turned to drama also, and in 1957 he produced a play which became very popular. The play was Simply Heavenly, which was based upon actually his prose narrative, title Simple Takes a Wife. Simple is the name of the black hero. So Simple Takes a Wife was a fictional narrative, but now he converted it into drama, and the title given was Simply Heavenly. So here again we have a working class Negro with some education and employment, but then facing the same problem, social discrimination, isolation, psychological anguish. So now the black hero in black drama is no longer a criminal, is no longer on the run, is no longer hunted and finally lynched by the white population. He is facing now the internal problems, not external. Internal are social and psychological, and not of the outright violence of the early phase, where he was being hunted, hounded, killed, lynched, so on and so forth. So this is what you have in Langston Hughes. Another playwright significant in this period is Lofton Mitchell, Loften, Lofton, Mitchell, Lofton Mitchell, who wrote his famous play Birth of a Nation, and a land beyond the river, that is in 1957. And he was known as an emerging black playwright because the critics saw potential in his work, and he gave a sort of dream to the black people, to his own race in America. And the dream is that there is another world beyond the river. So you don't need to be coerced and intimidated by your immediate surroundings. There is a future, there is a tomorrow, and that may be glorious, that may not be oppressive like the present. So he gave this hope to his people. And then comes even more important and a regular playwright who made a name permanently for herself. This is Lorraine Hansberry. Lorraine, Lorraine, Lorraine Hansberry, Hansberry. It's a woman writer, female dramatist, and a great writer at that, I would say. And for the first time, a professional dramatist. But unfortunately, she died rather early, at the age of 34. But then she left behind at least one play which is even today is rated as one of the greatest plays ever written in America, A Raisin in the Sun. A Raisin in the Sun, which title comes from a poem by Langston Hughes. If you recall, while doing the Black American poets, we touched upon this poem by Langston Hughes, where the poem is about a raisin in the sun. Actually, Black American dream. And Langston Hughes' question is, what happens to a dream deferred? Means, if a dream is not realized, if it is not allowed to materialize, then what happens? And the poem says there are two possibilities. Either it dries up like a raisin in the sun, slow death, slow drying up. Or the second possibility is it explodes into violence, into war. So that explains the condition of the blacks in America. Do they continue cherishing their dream for future, for equality, for respectability, for their rights equal to those of the whites, or do they have to explode, turn to violence, turn to war to get their legitimate rights and to get a respectable living in the United States of America? So, this great poem by Langston Hughes, a product of the Harlem Renaissance, this provides title to Hansberry's play A Raisin in the Sun. Now, Hansberry is, as I said, a female dramatist, female black dramatist who died rather young at the age of 34. Now, one thing peculiar about her is that her plays are not polemical. She is not being them edgy, drawing a sharp edge between the whites and the blacks. She is not raking up animosity between the two. In other words, she is not obsessed by the earlier consciousness, earlier questions about race, about color, about blackness, and about slavery. Now, she wants to put that behind and go forth and look to the future. And therefore, our emphasis is upon the future for the blacks. So, keeping the contentious issues out of our range, keeping the contentious issues rather behind, she wants to present a more inclusive picture of America, with of course blacks in focus, blacks as a primary concern, but at the same time not making it sharply polemical, not making it having potential for violence, for war. So, with this genial outlook and inclusive vision of life, she wrote this great play, A Raisin in the Sun, by which she is still known. Of course, she wrote some other plays also, but then this, as I said, continues to be a classic, and it is included even in the general American syllabus course, not particularly black writing course, but American course in general, where whites and blacks both are mixed. So, there in that inclusive course, A Raisin in the Sun will always figure as one of the major American plays. Now, another significant playwright of this later phase is James Baldwin, James, James Baldwin, Baldwin. James Baldwin wrote several plays and equally effective. He was religiously inclined. He was the son of a minister, not a political minister. A minister in America means the church man, the head of a church. He is called a minister. So, Baldwin was the son of a minister, and obviously carried this heritage in him. For example, even when he was in school, he said, if I am to be a playwright, he was conscious of this fact that he was going to be playwright. So even when he was not even adult, in his teens, he could say that if I am to be a playwright, I should try to improve a troubled world. I should try to improve a troubled world and try to be numbered among the great artists of my race. So he is not aiming at greatness among the white writers. He is aiming at greatness among his own black writers, at least. So that was his ambition, and he quite realized it, achieved it. One of his famous novels, he wrote novels also, was Go Tell It on the Mountain. Go Tell It on the Mountain. Very famous. But then he is now better known as a playwright, as a dramatist. And his first play was The Amen Corner. A-M-E-N. You say Amen. The terminology again comes from the church. The Amen Corner, which came out in 1954. And religion again is the central force in this play, as it was in his own life, Baldwin's. And the other play that he wrote, the next one, was Blues for Mr. Charlie. Blues for Mr. Charlie, Charlie, which came out in 1964. And here the hero, Charlie, is like Baldwin himself, the son of a minister. And he is rather offensive in his relationship with the whites. A certain, arrogance, certain bitterness. He doesn't take very kindly to any white man because he always remembers that these are the people who oppressed us, who kept us as slaves, who tortured us, who executed us, lynched us. So without forgetting that, he carries that bitterness continuously. And this comes out in the Amen Corner as well as Blues for Mr. Charlie. In both these plays, one can see his offense. And the hero in this play is Richard, who is killed by the white people, because he is also offensive like Baldwin himself. But then the killers, the murderers, they are let off by the court. They are not punished because they are whites. And that causes greater bitterness in the community. But Baldwin wants to show that you cannot expect any mercy or fairness from the white people. They will continue to be oppressive. They will continue to be cruel to the black people. So the only thing the blacks can do is to suffer, but to suffer bravely, to suffer to their advantage, to make it a strength rather than a weakness. They need not be weeping. They should be strengthening themselves to fight their ultimate battle for rights, to prepare for tomorrow, for the future. Now still more important writer than James Baldwin is Leroy Jones, L-E capital R, R-O-I, L-E-R-O-I, but R capital, as is the case in the Irish names also. So Leroy Jones, Jones. Leroy Jones, to begin with, wrote short plays, and these 3 short plays made him famous. The first was The Slave, the second Black Mass, and the third Dutchman. So these 3 short plays were staged and were a great success. And The Slave, for example, takes place during a race war between the whites and the blacks. So Leroy Jones is not like James Baldwin, not religiously inclined, not believing in suffering, and not believing in suffering as a means to empowering or strengthening yourself, becoming courageous, bold. No. He believes rather in hitting back, in a sort of militancy, and preparing for an outright war against the whites. And Leroy Jones also believed that given the chance to rule, to dominate, blacks will do better than the whites. So now you see how things have changed. To begin with, as we noted yesterday, the blacks were slaves, and the early drama, early black drama, had heroes who had been slaves and heroes who had been hounded, hunted, and finally lynched. But now in Leroy Jones' plays, you have heroes who consider themselves not only equal to the whites, but they consider themselves even superior, and they are ready to fight, ready to rule, and ready to prove that they are not only as good but rather better than the whites. So this is the message that Leroy Jones gives in his plays, and the message is very clear and loud in these early short plays themselves, like The Slave, Black Mass, and The Dutchman. In all the 3, Jones is against pacifism, against non-violence, because he thinks that is only a white man's trick to keep them subordinate, to keep them backward, to keep them unequal to the whites. Therefore, he believes in hitting back, believes in militancy, aggressiveness, and that is a big difference between the early dramatists and this later one. Later ones are not merely more confident, but also more aggressive, and they consider themselves equal to the whites, no longer that begging, no longer that cringing before the whites. And as I said, Leroy Jones went a step further. He says that blacks will do better if given a chance to rule. They can prove superior to the whites. He also wrote his autobiography under the title The Autobiography of Malcolm X, very famous, Malcolm, Malcolm X. And there again, you see, he is proposing militancy. That is why he was against, say, theory also. He said what the blacks need is not a separate theory of drama, nor a separate theater. You may recall that as early as 1821, James Hewlett, 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 he had tried for a separate American theater, early 19th century, 1821, a century before the Harlem Renaissance. And it was named African Grove Theater. African Grove Theater in New York City itself. But then it invited harassment by the police. They will come, even arrest the actors, keep them in jail. They will come back whenever they could and then act again. Then white hoodlums, they will create disturbances. They will not allow the play to go on the stage. So these disruptions by the hoodlums again, see, were a menace to the separate black theater. And finally, the Grove Theater was smashed. It was demolished by the hooligans from the white community. So thereafter, the black dramatists or the black community dare not have a separate theater for themselves. So gradually what they tried was to try Broadway theater itself, because that is managed by the whites. It is safe. And America was gradually getting liberal. After 1865 Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, when he lost his life, but gave equal rights to the Negroes, to these black people, things were changing. And the blacks were gradually getting accepted as citizens of America with equal rights. So they were being accepted on the Broadway theater also. And this acceptance ultimately grew into partnership, into assimilation, into inclusiveness, and that is why some of them, like A Raisin in the Sun, Lorraine Hansberry, her play, A Raisin in the Sun, could have hundreds of, staging performances. And as I said, Hansberry died rather early at the age of 34. The only female dramatist among the blacks. But then the more important than the male dramatists, her A Raisin in the Sun is still one of the classics. Even in the general American literature courses, It is taught in America as well as outside. No other black writer's play is as acceptable as this one. And the reason was that she did not make it polemical. She was neither docile nor aggressive, but kept her even tone. And she always believed that it is good to know good people, and it is good to follow goodness. Ultimately, it is this that will pay, and not your militancy, nor your slavery. So that is the story of the black American drama. And as I said, in this later phase, it came to be accepted and assimilated on the Broadway theater. And with Leroy Jones as a major American, black American dramatist, the black drama got a boost because he came to be recognized as a proper playwright, as a major playwright. Without any color, without any race, his plays could be enjoyed. And these 3-4 playwrights then, beginning with Hansberry, then Baldwin, and even Langston Hughes, and finally Leroy Jones. These 4 or 5 black American dramatists of the later 20th century, beginning 1950s and right up to 1980s and 90s, they established themselves, and that made a difference in the American society itself, because they succeeded in getting the black voice heard and getting justice to the black people. As I mentioned yesterday, 1954, the American Supreme Court allowed the black students to study with the white students in the same school, which was not earlier possible. So piece by piece, year by year, the rights were extended to them. And I would say the greatest contribution so far as black writing, black literature was concerned, came from the black drama. It was these dramatists, particularly this woman dramatists, Hansberry, Lorraine Hansberry, who made the greatest contribution. She showed that blacks can be as great, as good as any other, both as persons as well as writers. So there I will end the story of the black drama and theatre in America.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so very much for delivering such a nice lecture and explaining us in detail about the later phase and how the major contemporary dramatists emerged, how their growth took place in this phase. Now the question arises, because we have conducted the 2 lectures, one on the early phase and today on the later phase. What was the major difference between the 2 phases?
Well, the major difference was that in the early phase, the focus remained on the protest against slavery, protest against injustice, protest against oppression, public lynching, this kind of blatant ill treatment of the blacks. That was focus the point of focus in the first phase, in the early phase, and the writers were only inviting attention. In a way, it was pitiful, because they are inviting the pity of the whites, which means they accept their secondary position, they accept their subordinate position, and they can only beg for mercy, they can beg for the goodwill of the whites for better treatment. But now in the second phase, things are completely changed. The slavish attitude of the early phase is replaced by the militant mood of the writers, and they have gained confidence. They say, we are not inferior to anyone. In fact, given the chance, we can do better than the whites, even as rulers, not only as writers. So this kind of confidence is a complete reversal of the early phase. So now, obviously, not only the effect of the rights they were getting for equality and so on after the Civil War, but also the strength that the writers gave to the community, to the race, giving them confidence that you are no less than anyone, and therefore go ahead, go beyond the river and realize your dream. So dream now no longer drying up. Langston Hughes' poem, which Lorraine Hansberry uses in her play A Raisin in the Sun. That poem beginning with Dream Deferred, that was the title. What happens to a dream deferred? And the poem says two things happen. One is it may dry up like a raisin in the sun. Slow death, gradual drying up. The second possibility is that it may explode, leads to violence, to war. So in a way, this poem explains both the phases of the American drama. The early phase was the dream deferred. Dream was not getting realized. It was rather drying up like a raisin in the sun, dying a slow death. But in the second phase, you find that it is exploding. It is getting into the militant mode, and they are now in the fighting mode and fighting mood to get their equal rights.
Definitely, these phases explained how the black Americans were fighting for their rights with the help of the drama, with the help of theatre. So, as it is always said that drama or a theatre is an art of expression. It is an art with the help of which we try to explain to the public, to the people concerned, that what we are feeling. All the negatives and positive emotions are very beautifully expressed. So, can we say that regarding the two phases? Yes, in the first phase, the aggression, anger, gloom was shown with the help of the expressions, whereas in the later phase also the idea was given in a very balanced way with the help of expression. Yes, it is what we feel and what could be done for us. Could we say that?
Yeah, sure. There is maturing of the art, the maturing of the social attitudes, the maturing of the cultural refinement. All that happens in these 100 years. Obviously, it's a great stride for the black community to have moved from the position of slavery to the position not merely of equality, but of confidence bubbling with a sense of superiority. that we are rather superior to the whites. And physically, of course, they would always look sturdy and so on. But they said even in products of art and culture, even in governance, even in politics, we are second to none. So these ideas were better spread through the medium of drama and theater, because you get audience there and live audience, one-to-one, talk, whereas reading a poem or a novel, that is an individual affair, isolated one, and in your lonely space. But here it's a public performance and it makes a public impact. So drama made a great contribution, and as I said, Lawrence Hansberry would always be remembered as the greatest black dramatist produced by the community in America.
Sir, always it is said that drama or theatre, because it is a form of art, it is an expression of art, it has always been an unpaid profession, because the artists work more for the upliftment of the society, for self-expressions and things like that. Do the early phase or the later phase of the drama, if we talk about, was there a condition like that? There were no funds, and in spite of that, the dramatists were moving along with the flow.
Yeah, of course. The example of the Grove theatre, how it died its own death, just like a raisin in the sun. Lack of funds, lack of cooperation, lack of protection, even from the government. So all these hostile elements in the American atmosphere, climate, that contributed to it. So the black dramatists did face that difficulty of monetary support, difficulty of cultural support, and difficulty of government protection. All these were missing. So there was a long and intense struggle ahead of them. But then they went through it, they continued their struggle, and ultimately they realized the goal. Of course, they do not get the chance to rule even today. They have to remain as a secondary community, as a minority community. That dream, of course, has not been fulfilled, may not be fulfilled. After all the world over, and in the entire history of mankind of several thousand years, majority has always ruled. The sheer strength of numbers gives you power to rule. So in America, the whites are in majority, blacks are in minority, but then no longer a slave community, they are now the minority community. And the very changing form of address to them. As I mentioned, to begin with, they were Negroes. Then they came to be called Afro-Americans. And finally now they are called African Americans, not Afro. In between, of course, after the Negro, there was Black Americans. Now, no longer black even, it is African American. So their origin being African, they also now no longer nostalgic. In the first phase, they were nostalgic about Africa, their origin, their original home. And some of these writers in the early phase they thought, why not go back? Why not? Why remain in hostile circumstances? Why live in a country where you are not welcome? Why not go back? But these ideas no longer, were sustained. And in the second phase, we find they are a determined lot, they are a confident lot, and they are ready to fight. In fact, James Baldwin and Leroy Jones, they thought the war was inevitable. The blacks and the whites someday will be fighting a war, and they hope they will come out conquerors. They will not be defeated because they think they have inherent strength.
Sir, when we talk about the formation of the various theatre groups or drama groups in the two phases, as we always see in this phase also, if we talk about the American drama or theatre groups, or if we talk in context to India also, now the as we already said that drama or theatre is an art of expression, and now it lures or it attracts lots of people from different kinds of professions. Was there a time when these theatre groups were forming, it was attracting people from different areas, different groups?
Well, to begin with, things were different because there was severe discrimination and segregation among the two communities. And the whites will hate to see a black play staged. And they would not think of a separate black theatre at all. They will not allow that because they thought it would be a parallel growth to our own culture, and tomorrow it may pose a threat to our own existence. So with those suspicions, it was not possible. But then, as you say, gradually things changed. In the second phase, you find blacks are getting accepted in the white theatres, Broadway being the leading white theatre in New York. You see, there these plays got accepted, and the first one, as I said, was Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun. Her play was the first one, which was not merely accepted on Broadway, but had the longest run, several hundred performances. And then the audience also started getting mixed. So it took 100 years, but gradually some sort of inclusiveness developed in the world of theatre also. Both white and black writing. In fact, white writers writing about the black people. That also started in the second phase. And white and black audience mixing up. So you are right, mixing between the two communities and assimilation and some sort of integration, not complete, that came about gradually, but it did come about in the final phase.
Yes, as you explained us in detail, now the curiosity to learn more about the Black American drama and theatre has increased within ourselves. But as you gave the example of Lorraine, could we say that she was a motivation to other dramatists, that is the female or women dramatist?
Yeah, of course, she was a great source of inspiration, and everybody thought had she lived longer, after 34, she would have written more plays, like A Raisin in the Sun. There could be more. And for the subsequent dramatists, she did become a source of inspiration. That if she could write such great plays, why not we? So they attempted, and they succeeded, like Leroy Jones, even James Baldwin. So one thing leads to another, and one great mind, one great artist becomes a source of inspiration for the subsequent generations, and she became Lawrence Hansberry, Lorraine Hansberry.
With this note, because sir, we have very less time left with us, what else you would like to add up to this lecture? Because I hope that all the students who have watched this lecture would be very curious regarding this particular topic. So, final words of yours.
Well, final words are that the gender question is very important here, because to begin with, you find that women are denied education. So there was no question of having a black dramatist, because there is no education among women. So the only woman dramatist who came out, and came out in the later phase, because by that time they were allowed education, and higher education at the college level, university level, and obviously education also gives you confidence. It makes you refined, it makes you intellectually developed, and therefore equal to everybody. So this gender question is very important, because the black women, as now is the feeling among our lower castes, they were doubly oppressed. Doubly oppressed because first oppression being blacks, second oppression being women. So they had to live in more trying circumstances. But then to have come up from those very circumstances, a great writer, great dramatist like Lorraine Hansberry obviously would become a source of inspiration, particularly for women, that we can as well do it and do better than others.
Definitely, this should be the gist of the life, the motivation of life. Yes, we can do it, and I hope that all the students who might have watched us, dear friends, from now onwards, if you have any queries, you can definitely ask your queries. You can ask your questions by mailing us. I would like to tell you all that our mail ID is info.cec@nic.in. You can ask your questions if you want to access our lecture. You can definitely access with the help of YouTube, and later on you can mail your questions also, and next time if Professor Dahiya comes, we would definitely solve your questions. We will solve your queries in the next session in another lecture. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.